there was a way to combine the two, I was all about it.
Hi guys, I'm Chris O'Connor, Seattle native, born and raised. Is that better?
Get right up
There
to
we
it.
go. Just get up in there.
I write horror, science fiction, and dark fantasy. I'm classically trained as a marine engineer. I was sailing for the Department of Transportation for 5 years before that I was in the Navy, traveling outside the United States, and I started to study other people's cultures and their monsters and their religion and their folklore, and I combined it with the work that I do now, especially with the latest publication. There's all kinds of monsters from all over the world, and they have come together to basically in the world, and people have to come together and try and figure out how to stop that. And so I've always told really creepy stories when I was little. I always got invited to the slumber party because I was the one who told the scary stories, and then everyone would be awake at night because the tree would be scratching against the window, and I'd just be asleep, and everyone would be like, ah. So it's something that I always done. And I remember when I first got signed for my first book contract, I was the only person who was surprised. Everyone was like, yeah, well, you kind of knew that would happen. So I was just like, oh my God. And everyone's like, yeah, okay, well, you want to go shopping? I'm like, okay. And I'm nervous, so I'm rambling, so I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic.
Hi, my name is Jessica Dwyer, and I'm stationed in Eugene, Oregon, so I'm local. And I am a writer for Horror Magazine that I've been with for 10 years, since issue 2. Our new issue was out, and I interviewed Guillermo del Toro. Interview was only supposed to be for 15 minutes, ended up being 45. Because we started talking about the Night Stalker. And, are you guys hiring?
We'll talk after.
We'll talk after. I actually am one of the, I think there's only one other girl that writes for the magazine, and I'm very proud of the fact that I've been with them that long. I also have a webzine called Fangirl Magazine and a web radio show called Fangirl Radio that I started before I even started with Horror Hound. And the reason I did that was at the time, women have kind of come to their own in geekdom now. It's about time. And also women are starting to come to their own in horror thanks to people like the Soska sisters. And I'm really happy about the fact that women writers and directors are in there instead of your typical Scream Queen stuff. Creators and artists are coming out, and that's amazing. And that's what's so great about here. So Fangirl started because I thought there needed to be a female voice in geekdom, and it's been around for a while. My first interview for the site was Simon Pegg, which was a pretty good way to start. And that was because I cried and asked him, and he said yes. So now, 10 years on, actually 12 I think with that, and the radio show, we're getting ready to, what I do every Halloween, I'm kind of rambly, but what I do for every Halloween is I write a script for our radio broadcast that's a radio drama. And the last two, the first one we had Greg Nicotero on, and Alexander Phillip, who did a great documentary called Dock of the Dead. So this year, we're doing one that I call it basically a mishmash of H.P. Lovecraft meets Scooby-Doo meets Hunter Thompson. And Mark Neer, the voice of Commander Shepard, is going to be in it, and Doug Jones. And possibly one other person who, if the schedule allows. But we all star in it, and it's goofy, and we use sound effects, and it's kind of nuts, and it's geek-friendly. And so, yeah, we'll wrap that up because I'm kind of rambling. But that's what I do, and I've also got some essays in a new book that just came out called Taste the Blood of Monster Cereal, which is all about vampire films. And yeah, so I'm kind of all around kind of doing a little bit of everything. And but yeah, it's proof that a woman in horror can do more than just be in front of the camera. You can do other things too and represent your genre and what you love.
And I'm supposed to follow that with, hey, my name's Jade. I'm here to look pretty.
And you do.
But in all seriousness, I'm a DJ out of Seattle. I also work at a local community college there doing video editing and filming, some voiceover work and such, so I kind of bring that perspective to the table. I've always been a fan of sci-fi horror and like the crossovers, so I'm hoping to hear a lot about aliens, maybe some vagina dentata, and hopefully if you have time, maybe talk about Samus from Metroid a little bit and how that came about. So yes, quite less interesting, I'm sorry.
Yeah, James is here to be our
So
token male.
sorry.
We have to include him. And
This is
I know
all
for a
you.
fact that he is a huge fan of strong women.
It's true.
So, jumping right in, so for a little bit of, well, actually, before we even get started, because I'm looking around, are there any kids in here who might be offended if we talk about, like, sex or swearing or anything? No? Great, let's move the fuck on. All right. I just wanted to check, because I know I have a dirty mouth and I want to talk about some of the other sides of things, but I don't want to be that person who's the reason someone has to take their kid to therapy. So, right, that is my job. But jumping right in, oh, and somebody, little kids leaving. Bye. Sorry. Sorry. This is why I give the warning. So, jumping right in, a little bit of history. So, Women in Horror Recognition Month, what is it, why is it important, why do we give a crap? So, for a long time, a lot of people, you mentioned the Scream Queens, women were kind of selected to be the main character of a horror film because nobody wants to watch a man run around and cry for 2 hours, or at least that was the logic behind it. It's much more interesting when you have the girl in the wet, torn up tank top and she's just all like, and so,
Falling down.
right, but what kind of ended up happening is because of that, or at least that's my theory, you started having women who became more interested in horror because you could see women in horror. They were right there. They were very visual. Often they were even killers. And it was a very equal playing ground because, of course, at the end of these stories, 50-50 chance that that woman is going to survive and she's going to beat that killer. And so then, of course, it continued to evolve, and we have these excellent female filmmakers. They're getting behind the camera and doing things. And I don't even know how many years ago now, I want to say about 6 years ago, Hannah Neurotica started the Women in Horror Recognition Month, which is every February, and it's exactly what it sounds like. I think it revolves around the Axe Moon Film Festival initially, and it kind of evolved to celebrate not only these female characters in horror, but also the filmmakers, the writers, all the people who are involved. And one thing that people always ask, well, why do you need a separate women in horror emphasis on that? And the answer is the same as, well, why do you need Geek Girl Con? Why do you need to have female-specific stand-up shows? Why do you need to have these places? Because they don't exist. And you have to carve them out of the rock with a spoon. And that's in no way meant to be exclusionary. It's simply, it doesn't exist, and so we have to make it.
It's been classically male-dominated industry. A lot of industries have been classically male-dominated, so it's just a chance for women to have a voice. A place where a lot of times they are voiceless.
I look at it as we need it until we don't.
Yeah.
And,
Exactly.
And once that the example is the norm of 50-50, then we don't need it anymore. But
Exactly.
until then, you kind of do. And I part of the thing is, to me, is reaching out to girls out there who are the lone, like when I was growing up, I was the lone horror fan in my school, and I was a girl. So I was goth before it was a thing in the middle of Southern Illinois, and reading Fangoria when everybody else was reading Sweet Valley High. And everybody was like, Cosmopolitan, I'm reading Warzone. And I know there are still girls out there like that, and I feel like Women in Horror Month shows them that there is a place for them and people that understand it. And I think it's great. I try to motivate the girls to create, do something. If you want to celebrate Women in Horror Month, celebrate by creating. Do something, write a story. Film something, take some pictures, write a fanfic if you want about Freddy Krueger and how you want to visit him in the boiler room and see what happened. Robert's pretty hot.
It's doubly for Black women in horror.
Yeah.
Yes.
right before like the first book in the trilogy. Can you guys hear me? Thank you. 6 months before publication, I was really nervous because horror is male dominated and it's white dominated. So in my mind, both my characters, the main character and the supervillain, they were black in my mind because I write what I know. And I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to compete and nobody would want to read the story if both women at the helm were black. And I remember I had to take my car to get breaks and I was on the bus in Seattle and I found this book called The Fledging by Octavia Butler. That was the very first time I ever read a horror novel with a black woman at the helm. And I rewrote this whole entire book to have my characters the way that I wanted them to the bane of my editor's existence, but I didn't care. I was like, this is what needs to happen because I was 37 at the time, reading horror ever since junior high school, and that was the very first time that I read a horror book with a black woman at the helm where she wasn't stereotypical, she wasn't victimized, she was a strong lead without being like traumatized first, like with these films like Boys vs. Girls and was it Angel or the newest one where, you know, the strong woman lead in horror is only strong after something horrible has happened to her. In this book, there's nothing. She's just a strong lead because that's how she was born into the society of vampires. And so this is my first book, and right out of the bat, 6 months after I was published, no one knew who I was. I became a finalist in an international award for Best Multicultural Story and Best Cross Genre. Right out of the gate, nobody knew who I was. But like, so the feedback I get from all of my books, when I always read the reviews, I always do. It's not because I'm like egotistical. I mean, I am a little bit, but everyone always says how diverse the books are, and I know that I did the right thing because when I went back to rewrite it, the editor was like, "You can't do this. This is not how it's done, and these are not the ways these characters are depicted." And so, not only was I fighting the editor-in-chief, I ended up having to fight to get my rights back because they didn't want to publish it the way that I wanted it published. And so then 6 months later, I got the awards, and they're like, "Oh, come back." I'm like, "You know," like, it was like such a mess, like to fight your editor because you want your characters to look like you. That was a horrible, horrible experience. I was like, I'm not writing anything else. But then I went to my first convention as a vendor and not a volunteer, and other women in horror were like, "Dude, you better not stop writing. Are you kidding?" And so here I am 11 books later, one of my stories is getting turned into a movie, and that is from another black director and a black female screenwriter. So it's onward and upward, but the representation, the diversity.
Which one of your books is that's getting adapted?
It's a short story and it's called Charitable Acts, and it's the first book, it's the very first story in my anthology called And They All Lived Happily Ever After. And you can download that for free on Patio Books forever. It's authorized, legally free Patio Books. It has horror, science fiction, romance, whatever you want. But if you just Google Crystal Connor, C-O-N-N-O-R, I pop up everywhere.
And you can totally come up and talk to us afterwards and get business cards and all that info. But let's take a second and talk about the indie market and how that allows for, you know, this whole explosion. I feel like horror especially has a lot of room within the indie community to allow for, and not just the indie, but also like foreign markets. You see a lot of these horror films or sci-fi films or things that are created by people of color, created by people who wouldn't normally have a voice. Anyone here any shout-outs they want to give, or ways that they think that independent market is helping things?
Go ahead. You want to flip board? Okay, what is that? How do you guys do it?
Rock, paper, scissors.
I was just gonna say, I think that the independent publishing and self-publishing is awesome, and it's really opened doors for people that would normally have the opportunity to get their stuff out there. And that's how the anthology, or not anthology, but the new book I'm in, it's all about the vampire films that you normally wouldn't even hear about, is self-published, and it's selling out, and it's great.
I didn't know about self-publishing. Like when I just didn't want them to control my rights forever. And so when I was at Comicon and I found out about self-publishing, for me, I have control over everything. I seem to swim on my own, not really on my own, because I have a whole team of people who are supporting me, but it's just, you're able to create the stories that you want to tell. And I just, I don't understand why self-published authors get like such a bad rap. Like you guys, like not you guys, but like
It's
the
big
big
publishing.
the big six.
Yeah.
Like they just do everything that they can to like discredit us and you know, my very first book, I was signed with a small publishing company. So how am I not worthy now since I'm self-published? I still tell the same story.
And honestly, one of my favorite things to do, I love the Kindle app on my cell phone because I can have social anxiety at parties and look like I'm texting and actually I'm just reading books. But one of my favorite things to do is to go through the Amazon and look at like the free section or look at the independent publishers, look at the people who have put their stuff on there all by themselves, and often for less than $5, which I always feel really good about whenever I buy independent stuff. So I'm like, I'm putting this money directly in your hands, because I've been that person, even though my history isn't in publishing, and I understand that when you're the independent artist, that anytime that money goes directly into your PayPal account, you're like, oh my God, I can eat this week. That's amazing.
And it's like, it's incredible. Like, 6 people bought I have 2 versions of the audiobook. One is free and one is deluxe. And I don't have control over that. It's through Audible, so I have no control, which I kind of don't like, but it's recognizable, and they have like distributions everywhere. It's the most expensive product that I have, which I don't like because I wouldn't be able to afford it. I'm a starving artist, I am not kidding. But this week I sold 6, and I just was like, to all of you guys who just bought me dinner, thank you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just incredible that people are buying my work. Like they're buying it. Like I have it on. I have a version free, but people are still buying my work. There's no way to explain how that feels. Like it's just incredible. And I just want to make sure that I'm just worthy of every single dime that I'm getting from fans like you.
Well, and the first short story I ever wrote got published by an independent press, and it's not self-publishing, but it's like the next level, and independent press is really amazing. And it was great because in this anthology, it's called Uncanny Allegories, and it's by Postmortem Press if you want to look for it. I was one of, I think, the only female author, and the guy who was running it, the publisher, he said specifically, he's like, I didn't get enough women authors submitting, and you submitted this and it was great, and we want to publish it. And I'm like, wow,
Right.
what? Okay, deal. And but it was great because I don't think, you know, independent publishing houses like that really want to support who is good. They're looking to help support women out there, and this was just a phenomenal thing. And they do all kinds of horror, and I ended up being a part of this company that had Harlan Ellison as one of their contributors to the magazine they published. Forget Harlan Ellison, man. He's still alive. That's awesome. And Clive Barker was one of them too. He was submitting, and it was an independent house, and these guys were submitting to them, and that's where I think that's important to know. The big guys like it too.
So speaking of the big guys and looking at that, so we've talked about the independent market and how it's grown and how it's really empowered a lot of people. And there's definitely, the big guys are starting to pay attention. And I think that when it comes, to horror, because they want to follow the money. And when it comes to horror, you know, you've always had, again, these female characters, female characters who are right front and center, and who can just as often as the men be the killers themselves.
Everybody loves Mandy Lane.
All of what is on Mandy Lane. That was a really good. Yeah, I was gonna say. So, what are the more recent big name ones that we kind of want to look at as positive or negative examples.
So just books specifically? Or
Anything in the genre.
American Mary.
gonna have to.
We are gonna have to. It's happening now. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, American Mary is a film that is by the Soska sisters, correct?
Yes.
Okay, it's by the Soska sisters, who are amazing. If you don't know who they are, then pull out your phone and Google that right now. But they are awesome. But it's about this woman who is putting herself through med school, and she naturally runs into financial troubles because school is really, really expensive here. And I feel like I don't want to give away too much beyond that. Okay, so we're just gonna end it there. But
But I can't say there's no trauma. I mean,
there is a trauma though.
Yeah.
There's a very big trauma.
But
Give
it's
it
funny.
away.
Oh, no.
I know, yeah, we won't go there. In fact, I will follow up, with another thing here in a moment. But what I really loved about the American Mary, so I actually want to compare American Mary, and there's another one in the medical profession that came out recently. It's been causing a lot of hubbub. Is Nurse.
Yeah.
Which, admittedly, the first time I watched it, I couldn't finish it. I got up halfway through, and I wanted to throw my laptop against the wall, and I actually came back and finished it later. I've been watching movies in like halves or thirds lately, because I get halfway through and I'm like, this is garbage, and then I come back and I'm like, this is still garbage, but at least I finished it. The second half of Nurse was better than the first, when it kind of changed who the narrator was, but it was still terrible and encouraged a lot of really awful things. And I think that with Nurse, you had this character who was using sex as a weapon, and was really transparent. And from the opening credits of Nurse, you know that they're going for a very specific pulp novel style, and they're kind of trying to go for the lowest common denominator and that shock and that pulp novels. There's all these covers, and I love those in literature, but when you see it actually played out, it's not cute. Whereas in American Mary, you have this girl who is extremely intelligent. She knows what she's doing. She knows the human body. As soon as she discovers a different career path that's more to her liking, she jumps on it. She takes control of situations. And I think it's really interesting to see how those two films hold up side by side, where you have Nurse, which was, I think it was a bigger, but I only see these things on Netflix, so I have no idea what the ramp up was, but I feel like Nurse was a much bigger, I saw a lot more advertising for it. There was a lot of stuff kind of geared, and it was a very commercial film, whereas American Mary, while not entirely an independent film, because they definitely had funding for it, was clearly a labor of love.
Well, I think it's interesting too that Catherine Isabel's in another horror film that I really love. It's very female empowered, called Ginger Snaps.
Yep.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the best series out there in terms of a female presence in a movie. And I love that it also talks about sisterhood. And you don't really see that either in a lot. And I thought that was great.
I love Ginger Snaps too.
One thing I have to say about Ginger Snaps, it actually taught me something about my anatomy. There is a part in the film where the nurse is explaining periods, and she's talking about it, and I'm like, oh my god, I thought I was a freak. Like, I felt so much better. I was like, wait, I thought I was weird, but they never told me that part in sex ed.
This is the American education system.
No, this is exactly
This is why this is a problem.
I learned
Exactly why we're here, right?
my menstruation issues from a werewolf movie. Which I just think is great filmmaking. We do have a question, although I don't know if I trust this question because I feel like it's going to be a riddle, but go ahead, sir.
There's also another one called I Spit on Your Grave.
Actually, okay, let's talk about revenge, or rape revenge films. So I'm a sexual assault survivor. Sometimes I have issues watching rape revenge films for a couple of reasons. I think that it is very, very important to show that rape is a thing that happens, that it's a very unfortunate fact of life that a lot of people, not just women, but people will deal with in their lifetime.
Huge number of people.
A ridiculous number of people. Like, think of all your friends, and I bet like 1 in 4 of them has dealt with it.
I would say more than that.
Oh, statistically. But so there is this whole genre within the horror industry of the rape revenge fantasies. And I have very mixed feelings on them because sometimes they can be very empowering, but sometimes they're just shock factor and can actually be more harmful and demeaning and kind of insulting to people who have experienced that.
What I was just going to mention is that Amir, the director for the original, he ended up seeing a girl not getting raped, but afterwards. So when he was in the so he decided to put in the film, this is what rape looks like.
Well, and again, I think it's very important that we as a society not shy away from this terrible horror that happens to so many people.
It often gets swept under the rug. I've
It
heard
does.
so many horror stories of just like people trying to get help, and authorities are like, they talk to the victim, they talk to the perpetrator. Oh, she's just lying. It's swept under the rug.
There's actually a huge
Nobody-
issue in Seattle right now where there was a woman who was attacked and the police did not show
They
up.
didn't show up.
And there's a lot of people who are trying to play the, oh, well, they did show up, you're just making everything up,
Yeah,
or,
it
you know,
was-
we don't believe you because we think the police would show up, and all these
They didn't.
really horrifying things.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not gonna name my mic because I'm pretty loud anyway. But what I was gonna say was the thing that bothered, also sexual violence survivor, the thing that bothers me about the rape revenge movies, I have yet to see one from the perspective
Thank you.
of a female.
Thank
It's
you.
always the
Thank
men
you.
that write these movies. And if you're gonna do it from a male perspective, then do it like Deliverance.
Right. No, and I think that's a very valid point. And again, that goes back to, are we dealing with an issue that is a legitimate thing that we need to confront in our society, or are we just using it for shock value? And I think another thing too is that very, very often you only see got the title of forcible rape. It's not coercion, it's not the, oh God, I'm afraid to
The
tell
rape rate?
people. And it's often, it's a group of men who are going to physically overpower and to sorry, go ahead, say what you're going to say. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to change the direction of this downer conversation here. I'll make your last comment.
I was just gonna say that's the least, I'm tired of that subgenre because it's all the same. It's all the same. There's always a group of guys and the girl is traumatized and then she all of a sudden has all this strength that she didn't have before. And as a veteran, a war veteran, killing someone causes its own trauma. And you have this girl killing multiple numbers of people in like days, and there's no, she's sleeping well and she's drinking tea and what's happening here? Like that's right, like that's no.
It's not realistic.
At all.
No, it's not.
Well, and I was gonna say,
There, what, no, I mean, what?
I was just
Go ahead.
gonna say that what you were saying is so true in the sense also that the rape revenge films never ever give time to grief, recovery,
Thank
to
you.
Finding yourself again, to regaining even balance from what you had before, and it's almost all of them are about, well, all these men did this, and they imbued you with maleness, so now you're really strong and you can go kill them all.
That is the winner right there. The only thing you see is like the crying in the shower.
She's got a question too.
Yes.
Oh, I had a question and then it was a
We'll
little,
take the votes.
a story recommendation kind of along those lines from Stephen King's Full Dark No Stars, the story Big Driver.
Yeah. Stephen King's Big Driver, you said?
Yeah.
I have my little notes here because I know I'm gonna walk out of here with like a million things I need to read.
Rosario Dawson was.
Wait, hold on, she's,
Sorry.
It's okay. I wanted to ask the panel what you guys think about the notion that like women who are killed in horror movies, how we have to leave a beautiful corpse. Like even if somebody's getting stabbed by Jason, her lip gloss looks great.
because it's for the male audience.
yeah.
And it goes back to the money, what sells.
I have to say this. So I love Wes Craven. Bless you, sir.
God rest his soul.
God rest your soul.
Exactly.
And I have to say, if you haven't seen this documentary called My Name is Nancy.
Oh my God, you guys.
Love it.
Write that down.
My Name is Nancy. In the documentary, man, I cried as this girl talked to Heather Langenkamp talking about how watching enough of her rape. And when she sees Freddy Krueger and Nancy fighting in the bushes, that was her fighting her attacker. And I gotta give props and love to Wes Craven because in his movies, he had strong female leads that were not sexualized. They were not. And Nancy forever is going to be the strongest, smartest girl. She was a normal girl and she overcame some major, major trauma. And the reason it was in my head, but you brought up The Beautiful Corpse, and I'm sorry, he uglified the hell out of, what's her name? Drew Barrymore. Drew Barrymore was not a beautiful corpse.
Yeah.
She was gnarly, she had her guts hanging out. He didn't sexualize, and when he did, like, it was a joke, you know, you had the girl in her little skirt with her boobs, and it was just an in joke because that was the stigma.
Because it was a commentary.
Exactly, it was self-referential. Yeah.
Well, and I think that.
Wait, he had a question.
Yeah.
No, I know, and she had another thing. I just wanted to say one thing about Nightmare on Elm Street, though. Even though she wasn't necessarily a sexualized object, there was still a lot of sexual imagery within Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
But it was very subtle, you know, like that claw coming out of the bathtub.
Yeah.
It was just, you know, but I think they did it very well.
Yeah.
All right, and did she have a question as well? Did we cut you off from?
Cut you off?
I'm like,
No.
He had something and I had something and then, yeah.
Okay.
I want to address this one to the panel. As writers and authors, how do you, since this great fantasy revenge, it's kind of a minefield apparently, because if you do go into the pain, the grief, the suffering, and the recovery, doesn't that kind of slow down the story a little bit? You got to find that kind of balance between keeping your reader engaged and at the same time touching on these things. So how do you, as authors, navigate that? How do you
I
develop the
think
character?
the biggest thing is to draw you into character, and it just depends on the tone of the story. Because like, I'm an adult child survivor of domestic abuse, and one of the stories that I almost didn't publish is called Amber's New Friend. And the reason I didn't publish it, I almost didn't publish it because it's really too close to home. Like I read horror to escape, but it cuts close to home. And it's a slower paced story. But once you get connected to the character, you're stuck. Like, you pick up a book for me, like, if you read this book, this is the gateway drug. You will be my fan forever. And if you try and leave me, I'll find you. So, I'm like...
Not to be the abusive relationship, but...
It's like misery in reverse. Once you're my fan, you're my fan. So, but it's just, it's the connecting with the character. You know what I mean? And so when you're watching this brutalized gang of people like destroying this woman, you're connected to her. But when you are in her bathroom with her and she's just broken down and she's, you know, swallowing pills or standing on the ledge of the window and you're like, don't do it. You're connected with her, and so then you're able to slow down the pace of it, along with Amber's New Friend. And it's slower, but the end is it kicks you in the jaw. But I got so much feedback from that I did the right thing by publishing it, even though I was super, super close not to.
And I think it's important, again, to put that mirror up to show, you know, the world these things that we often want to pretend don't happen. And I think a great example of showing PTSD in horror is the miniseries It. Within the past year, I was sick in bed and I sat and rewatched all of It, which is like a 6-hour adventure. But I realized that so much of what's going on is PTSD. So much of what they're seeing, they have the flashbacks, they have the panic attacks. They're constantly feeling like children, like scared little children all over again, which I think is something that a lot of people who struggle with these issues feel. I know when I have the anxiety issues, that's how I describe it. I'm like, I feel like a scared little kid. And I think that it is possible to show these things without slowing down the story as a whole and actually making it something that's interesting. and making it something that's relatable. One thing I've been thinking about lately with comic books and hero characters is that we actually, when we see these movies or read these comics or stories, we want to see these people who are larger than life feeling like human. We want to know that they struggle, because if they can struggle and still be Captain America and save the day, then so can we.
And it's really interesting, and I don't mean to like take over, but I have a character in this book named Cassandra, and everyone always relates to her right away, but she's been through so much stuff. She stood on a bridge and she tied herself to a cinder block and she threw it off the bridge. But she didn't die, and you'll find out if you read the book, you'll know why. But like, so many people write me over this Cassandra character. She's the most on the surface, like, I mean, she's gone through the ringer.
So definitely buy this book. So we're entering our last 15-20 minutes, and I want to give our other panelists a chance to, let's give our other panelists a chance to answer that question about how do you include things like PTSD or trauma or the recovery process without slowing down?
It really, you have to, for me, it would be, you have to build it around the story you're already telling, and pace it the way that you would normally pace it. I mean, if your character is interesting enough and if your audience has enough of a connection with them already and is already in their brain and enjoys them, they'll take the time to suffer with their character. My line is, the more I love a character, the more I'm going to make them suffer, because I love angst. Angst is candy.
So what I'm going to do now is we're into our last thing. If I get everyone who has a question, let's have you guys line up. Oh, and you're ready, as we let James here either give his thoughts or give some shout outs, and then I want to talk about one quick thing, and then we'll spend the rest of it answering your beautiful little questions.
No, you're all doing great here, and I really can't.
We got the man's approval, everybody.
I mean, this is whitest male, thumbs up, yeah, right. Well, no, I love hearing your perspectives on this, because to me, the best way to write a character is you have to have some thread of truth in there, some little bit of honesty, no matter how fictional this character is. People recognize the truth, and the honesty is what will shine through. The rest is the balancing act of what makes a good writer or a good work. Because I mean, revision, right? Am I right? But yeah, keep it honest as you can. Draw from experiences of the people around you.
All right, I have one last thing to say, and I'll make this quick, because like all this week I've been like, how do I want to portray this, and I want to get this in. So I think a lot of horror, and this is something that I actually, interestingly enough, studied in college, because I had the best English classes ever. There's a lot of horror that is fear of sexuality. And I think that I kind of made a feminist crack about Jade's, and the male approval. And we see, I think the best example, we see a lot of reactionary anti-feminism, specifically within things like Gamergate, or the men's rights movement. That's very like, oh God, we don't like that, and it's scary. And I want to, and I think that if you look at, I know. And if you look at horror throughout the ages, like vampirism is very much about, well, depending on which way you're looking at it, like classical Dracula-style vampirism is very much fear of female sexuality. I talked about, Nightmare on Elm Street. We have this clock coming up. Puberty within Ginger Snaps. Thank you, 10 minutes. And one thing I want to talk about, or at least give a shout out to, is teeth.
Yeah.
Because you go from there. All right, I got it. All right. So what amazes me about teeth is that you have this character who is this very Christian. She's very goodly. I know.
It's on Netflix.
I know. I gotta say, it's on Netflix. But the thing that amazes me is she's afraid of her body.
Yeah.
The way I think many young women are afraid of their bodies. The way I think a lot of people are afraid of young women's bodies. But the kicker is she actually has a reason to be afraid, which. It's on Netflix, watch it. But I had to throw that in there.
Also, It Follows.
Yes, It Follows was actually, yeah. All right, Coraline.
I had a question for our film editor.
Yeah.
I wanted to know what projects you've done, if there was anything interesting that you got to be part of in the behind the scenes that we would get to see the actual film.
Yeah, there's a number of things. It's a community college, so it's not as grand and as alluring as I made it sound, but we always have interesting authors coming through, and people from alternative cultures and cultures that just don't have a voice. I get to see a lot of that because I'm there filming all of it. One of the more interesting things that I've seen more recently is we had a guy, Mo, come in who was one of the first pop lawyers in Washington State. He actually went through and talked about the history of why and how marijuana became years that were smoking pot. You realize how ridiculous it is to have pot as a class 1 substance. But it was all Nixon, and it was Nixon just wanting to get the hippies off his lawn, specifically the minorities. So it was rooted a lot in racism.
And you can actually watch a lot of those videos and interviews on the YouTube.
On the YouTube, and most colleges have some sort of visual media services where you can go and check out what they're doing, what kind of authors have come through. Like we got the author from The Corner of Bitter and Sweet. Can't remember his name. We had a huge turnout for that. It was all about the internment camps in World War II, the American internment camps. The Japanese and Chinese Americans basically got locked up for businesses, and this was happening when he was a boy, and he wrote about it. I believe it's mostly fictionalized, but it's based around this very tragic point in American history. So to answer your question, I do see a lot of wonderful things, but that is really kind of away from.
You're not working on the horror movies.
No, there's nothing female horror specific at this juncture. I will keep you updated on that.
Because that doesn't pay the bills as well as you would like. And we have our.
So, this isn't really a horror movie, but one movie I did really like was Hard Candy.
Oh, yes,
Hard Candy.
Okay, so actually, revenge movies that are done well and not a good first date movie, or a great first date movie, because if that works, then like you're with that person forever. I don't even know where to start on Hard, because there's so much amazing stuff out there. Hard Candy is amazing. It's I think up there with Saw as far as like bottle movies that take place in a very small confined space but don't feel like they're taking place in a small confined space. I don't go watch Hard Candy.
Have you seen with Rosario Dawson, where she's in
Falling.
and gets raped?
Falling.
And then the way that revenge went through, it was unexpected.
I think that is a really good, to answer your
Yeah,
question.
thank you.
That is a really good movie to watch if you want to watch how it's paced and how we go through her. We're watching her recover and she doesn't do it well.
Did you have
And
anything
it
else
is
to add?
a very, very revenge movie, but it's of the darker side. Like she's not slashing people. She just.
Go watch Falling is the moral there. I won't let him finish his last.
So the last question that I have is that when Squid is watching all these vampire movies with the blonde lady always dies, but then he comes up with Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who's always strong and fighting vampires.
I think the most important thing that I ever took away from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, there is a scene where she is teaching her little sister and they're fighting and it's very casual and they're having this conversation and the question they keep asking is who has the power? And I think that's the most important question that you could possibly ask. One last thing that I jotted down that I definitely wanted to talk about would racism and Lovecraft.
Here we go.
So, okay, real quick.
5 minutes?
I know. No, I condensed it. So H.P. Lovecraft, totally racist son of a bitch. Yes, he was a product of his times. However, he should have known better because if you look at the people he hung out with, lots of smart, intelligent people who were very progressive for their time. But he was afraid of women, he was afraid of lots of things, and were he published in this day and age, we would never accept it. However, because he was afraid of everything, and by everything I mean everyone who wasn't a straight white man. He was many things.
There was a lot going on in that.
Again, we couldn't cover that in 5 minutes, but because he was afraid of everything, that comes out in his horror, and that fear, that, oh my God, what is this? And I think that that's something that a lot of people who are those minorities, who are women, who are people of color, that's what draws us to horror, I think, is the realization that there is power in being the monster. but you can also defeat the monster.
Sorry to cut you off, but there's also, what about the Edgar Allan Poe stories and poems?
I'm not sure what about them relatively.
I mean, because, like something like the Black Cat probably is his best story ever.
Oh, boy.
I think I've read that one. Can you give us a synopsis?
Yes, I can.
All right.
Because the Black Cat is basically, because you know how Edgar Allan Poe is really poor.
Right.
So what the Black Cat is about is that he kills his wife, but she has this black cat, and the police come because he walls up his wife in his basement. So, but and sometimes the black cat appears in there, but you think it's the wife actually crying, but it's not that. It's the black cat letting him know that she's there.
He walled up the cat with the.
He wanted the cat with the wife.
Yeah.
All right, we have 3
That's
minutes.
brutal.
Relate that to women in horror.
That's
Go.
brutal.
I want to say really quickly, George Romero, if you want to see the progression of women in horror films and how they change, watch the original trilogy of The Dead.
Thank you.
And black people too.
I actually got to interview Barbara, or the actress who played Barbara, and she had no idea that there was a women in horror movement, and talking to her about that, she, like, her face lit up. She got really excited, which is interesting because as a character, Barbara's kind of this willowy, you know,
She's awesome.
but as an actress and as a person, she was amazing. She was all for it. She's like, yes, tell me about women in horror. And I was like, you're amazing.
How did we not talk about Emmy Wolf? How did that get missed?
Because we had 15 minutes. All right, so closing thoughts here. I'm gonna start at the
All right,
end with
next
James.
year, reading rainbow format. I want people to stand up and tell us why you should read this book.
Ooh, I like it.
We're gonna have like a
Burton in
timer.
here, right? Get the theme music. Love it, everyone.
All right, next year.
I just want everybody to, Women in Horror Month to me means making sure that if you are a female fan of the genre or a creator, get it out there, do whatever you can to get your stuff out there and seen. Celebrate yourself that way. Don't be afraid to celebrate yourself. And if someone calls you a Satanist, or if you're calls you a name or whatever, or mocks you for what you love, tell them to kiss your ass.
And if you come along a female horror creator that you like, just let everybody know. You don't have to read or watch the horror to support us, but word of mouth, buy our t-shirts, like us on Facebook, that's another way that you can support us as well. So, thanks for coming out, you guys.
Absolutely. I think definitely look up those indie authors, look up those indie horror films, look up, and there's, Wolf Cop got funded on Kickstarter, and that was, like, not necessarily women in horror relevant, but definitely, there's some amazing stuff going on, the internet age going on there. Read all the things, support local, look up Women in Horror Recognition Month. There are lots of great resources. Spend February checking out some awesome stuff. There's a lot of events that are actually fundraisers. We throw an event in Seattle called Vaginomicon that is, I'm very serious. It is a play off of V-Day and the Vagina Monologues, and it's the Vagina Monster Logs, and it's amazing, and we donate all the money to the local women's shelter. It's also Black History Month in February.
Thank you.
Support horror, support women of color, support everybody, just all the things. Thank you all for coming out. Have a great time.